Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to 21 Hunting and Fishing, Tuna in the Moon update, part 5, part 5. Thank you for wasting some more time on my channel today. Hopefully it will be a little bit enlightening and educating and fun. So if you are first seeing part 5, then you have, as far as I know, 4 other parts to follow up on and watch first. And then like a short maybe to make this really make sense. But this is a data analysis about tuna in the moon. You hear a lot about Blue Fin Tuna and how they're impacted by the moon. This is analysis based off of 3 major San Diego landings: Seaforth, H&M, and Fisherman's landing. So again, go back and watch those parts, the previous parts, before watching this, because it won't make tons of sense. Maybe it will, maybe you'll be missing a few things, but I'm not going to get into like more like the details of the data analysis, like at least the technicalities a little bit of themselves. So that's why you need to go back. First things first, our trip in the Constitution, it was the 15th through the 17th of July. The boat caught 41 tuna, 40 of which were caught during the night on, essentially a pretty good night bite. That first night we were in the zone. The boat was stopped more than it was moving and trying to find sonar schools. And when it did move, it moved for literally like 200 yards and then stop again. So lots of action was had, lots of casualties. It would have been way more if there weren't so many tangles and things of that nature. My father-in-law hooked up 5 times, got one in the boat. I hooked up once, got one in the boat. I was using 100-pound, and I think the ticket was 80-pound, talking to other guys. I think the 80-pound just helps keep the jig straight up and down in the water more. And my father-in-law got bit on a 400-gram knife jig, and they were recommending slightly lighter than that. But I think that extra weight helped it keep up and down. And I got bit on a 12-ounce Eddie bomb. And again, if I could do it over again, I would have. Well, I actually had another rod that I was setting up for the second night, and it was 80-pound braid directly to a bite leader with the same jig. I think that would have got bit a little bit more, but I didn't have a chance to really test it because there was absolutely 0 bites on that second night. But we also had to move spots because the boat had a time hack that it had to get back to the dock. Some pictures from our trip. These are some tuna, some happy fishermen taking pictures with the tuna. And I know your tuna are way bigger. Make sure you leave that comment. So me and my father-in-law, we caught a 55-pound tuna and a 60-pound tuna, and honestly, that's gonna be enough meat. I still have tuna in the freezer from like 2 years ago, so I don't need a lot of tuna on these trips. Honestly, sometimes it's like you want to catch, but then when you get home and you look at your freezer, you're like, oh, okay. Like, honestly, I got enough, and any more is just kind of gonna sit there forever and I still have enough to give away and all that stuff. But anyways, so let's get started. So remember, the best time to go fishing is when you can go. I started this as a fun project, but there does seem to be something to learn from this. And this is from the last video. What I'm doing is I'm looking at data. I'm looking at spikes in the data. So like spikes in the action, increased action. And then I give a tuna to, what you see here. Certain number of days before the new moon, certain number of days after the new moon, and same thing for the full moon. And these are based off of fish reports for when the boat returns. So that's actually a pretty important detail, because that's when, if the boat returns on the 17th, it's a 2-day. The date says the 17th, but you have to remember that the fish were actually not all caught on the 17th. And so that's something important to remember. And this is from the last video. These are the added tuna. Yeah, let me do that again. Sorry. Talking and driving at the same time. So as you see, there is no tuna, no spikes on the full moon, which some people would say that anyway. You don't need to be looking at this to say that. There was a spike on the new moon, and you can see that like the action around the new moon is a lot flatter, and then it's a little bit more polarized on the full moon. So you have like nothing the days leading up to the full, then a little bit after the full, and then like a week plus later you get a bigger spike. So the action is a little bit more polarized. So this is from last video. Again, go back and watch those videos if you are interested in this stuff. This is also from the last video. So as you see, what I do is I graph the moon illumination and BFT per angler. So like 1 would be 100%. So that would be like a full moon, but it would also mean like 1 tuna per an angler. The number just kind of works out that way. And this orange line is the ratio of tuna per angler. And this is the prediction I made last time. And so it actually, and then what you see here, so you see all these trips returning like May 20th or May 21st. And then if you look on the graph, like here's that trip. So like that trip that I predicted actually worked out. And that's, what was that prediction based on? It was based on previous analysis that I did. I made another prediction. Please stay tuned if you want to see how that turned out. So let's get it started. Okay, so here's the new graph, the one that you came to see. So part 4, you can see, is all the data that's located underneath this grayed out bracket. You see that very steady moon cycle. It's still that blue line. And then you see this like very jagged up and down line, and that is the Blue Fin Tuna per angler. And then I added something new to this analysis. So Excel will give you a trend line. So this orange sort of sloping line that looks like a slide is the best fit. So that's a mathematically predictable line that is the best fit for that orange line. And as you can see, there was the bite this year didn't really start until halfway through May, and then in June, you kind of leveled out a little bit, and you still see that dip in the action during the full moon. And then you had this like really big spike around June 18th, and then you can see like in July there was almost like no bad trip in July. You can see that there was a pretty predictable lull in the bite reports, so the fish counts around the full moon. But then after that, it just kind of skyrocketed. So July has been a really good bite. And if you look at the data, the same data from last year, this year, July, as opposed to July of 2024, it was much better. Yeah, it was hard to pick a bad trip in July. It is July 24th, 2025. So July is not over, but I did want to kind of get through like another new moon and full moon, and now we're heading back towards a new moon before posting this part. So here we are. So let's call out the spikes and see where those ended up. So you have one on like July 2nd, and there's going to be another table that summarizes these. And so this is a bit of an art chart. If I get the date wrong, you'll see it on the next slide. I think that's July 4th. And then, you kind of see that lull. And then after that lull, you get this, after the full moon, you get that first spike, which looks like it is the 14th. And then you get a similar spike like very quickly after. And then you get two really big uptick in the action on the 21st and 20th, if I remember right. Again, this data is going to be summarized in the table. Now, how I do this data is I go to the San Diego fish reports.com or whatever, and I just take the number of anglers and the number of bluefin tuna caught. Now, you have to keep in mind, and I keep in mind, I've talked about this a lot in the previous videos, that not every angler is targeting the bluefin, but when you do analysis like this over a large data set, you get closer and closer to the truth and the predictable. It just becomes more. What am I trying to say? It becomes more accurate when you make the prediction. The bigger data set you use, because it kind of washes out that junk data. So to summarize, bite didn't start until halfway through May. It kind of leveled out a little bit in June, but then July it was game on. But there was still some predictability in the bite based around the full moon mostly. And so here's the spikes only. So again, if you want to look, again, these are the dates of the fish reports. So those are the dates that the boat returns back to dock. So if you're going on a day and a half to 2 day, 3 day, whatever. So, so for example, June 16th, 5 days after the full, it was a good action, but those fish were probably caught on the, 14th, 15th, 16th or something like that, or probably 13th, 14th, 15th, because the boats typically get back early in the morning on that day. So again, these are when the boats return, not when they leave. That's kind of an important detail. And as you can see, so we predicted a pretty hot trips on returning on July 18th, and you can see that the 17th was good, and then the 20th was good. So I would say our prediction is pretty good. And I even have a summary of that coming up. And I know you don't believe that I predicted this, but that's fine. I don't care, because I posted a YouTube short, and you can go back and look at that too if you don't believe me that I predicted it. So again, fun project. The best time to go fishing is you can go. But if you have your druthers, I would say avoid the full moon. Like on it, or like the first 2 or 3 days before and the first 2 or 3 days after. Just try to avoid the the full moon. And then after that, once you get away from the full moon, let's see. These are the tuna that I'm adding to our graph to show the spikes in the action for the dates of this analysis. So 5 days after the full, 6 days after the new, 6 days before the full, 3 days before the full. So that's the first tuna for 3 days before the full that all this year. But again, July was definitely a good month. It still seems to be a good month for the bite. And then another one 5 days after the full. So that's interesting. Same time frame, same moon age. Then 7 days after the full, 4 days before the new, and then 3 days before the new. So you can see that it's kind of continuing this trend where the bite around the new moon is relatively flat, whereas the full moon, you see a little bit more polarization in the data. So like that day 6 through 4, I would say before the full is good. And then, if you wanted to throw out that 2 days after the full and 5 days after the full, do that. And then even move your trip a little bit further away from the full. So you're returning somewhere around that 7, 8, 9 or 8 day mark after the full would probably be a pretty good thing, if you wanted to follow this. Again, even before I did this analysis, I would have typically avoided the full moon. But again, I like to prove things with data, and now I'm looking at the data. I'm like, oh, okay, it's not just an emotional reaction of what I've heard other people say. The data actually shows this. So here's the latest prediction I made, and there's a link, and you can't click it or whatever, but prediction hot tuna trips. I'll post part 5 of my analysis and these trips return. So that's like the name of the short, and here I am posting the part 5 of the analysis, and here it is. It's several days after 18th and 19th of July, and those trips return. So how do those trips do? I would say pretty well. So you're getting, 1.5 BFT per angler. That's pretty good. And when you see numbers like that, you have to know that there's a lot of casualties, right? There's pop-offs, break-offs, tangles. And so the action is actually probably even better than what these numbers would say. And if you've ever been on one of these trips, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. So I don't need to continue to beat that drum. So there you go. That prediction more or less seemed to come true as well. I think so. San Diego FishReports.com is what I use for the catch reports. And then I also use some other moon data website. There's 1,000 of them out there. I don't really bother to put that here just because they're so ubiquitous, whereas the San Diego FishReports.com is a little more specific to what we are talking about. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know if you think this is interesting or just a bunch of voodoo black magic. It is kind of fun. It does take me some time to put it together. And so that's it. Remember, kill something, drag it back to your cave, and eat it. See ya.